Hello, welcome to the X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Today I am joined by one of my co-hosts, Genevieve Bartowski, a licensed psychologist who brings a unique perspective to the intersection of psychology, privacy, and AI governance. Hey, Genevieve, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. This is your second time here. The first
Yeah.
time we spoke about how a psychologist ends up in privacy and
hmm
AI governance consulting, which is a very interesting intersection of
Yeah.
these two things. And for those interested, you should be interested. I can't imagine you're not interested. Check out that podcast. It's linked to below. Genevieve, thanks for spending the time.
Of course.
Um, so today we want to talk about a presentation you recently gave.
hmm
Um, it's really very timely. So maybe you can just give an overview, the title of
hmm
it. And I kind of want to get into that because it's really a fascinating topic. And you did a really good job of digging into the history and so
hmm
forth. So if you would.
Yeah. So I am part of Shield, which is a nonprofit based out of Italy. And we have a lot of conferences actually. I think for the rest of the year, there's one at least monthly, and they're all free to attend, and they're virtual and global, which is really nice. And this one
So
was
long as it doesn't cut into your X Factor time, Genevieve.
right. No,
All
no,
right. Well,
I don't speak at every conference.
oh, okay. I was thinking we may have to negotiate something behind the scenes, but okay. Anyway, go ahead.
No, there's plenty of experts who know lots of stuff that I don't know that, it's nice to be able to spotlight them. And one of the things that Shield does is really trying to get like a global, a lot of global education and understanding around the dangers of not just the dangers, but also like the safe use of AI and different technology. And so this one that we had this week for June was on AI chatbots. And so I ended up speaking on the psychology of trust with AI companions. So specifically, I started with the like where AI started, which is really it. When I was doing the research for this, my psychology nerd side, um, really like I just completely nerded out and was surprised by what was found. Mhm.
And again, you just bring these two elements together as few do. When you talk about this companion technology,
Mhm.
is there any distinction to be made between that and chatbots? Is this idea of companionship broader? Is it more specific? How do they interrelate?
Mhm. I mean, all the companion bots are chatbots. There are different kinds of chatbots, but the companion ones are something like you would see with like character AI, or where you can create different. There's actually one I think I shared the article with you where you can actually now chat with Kurt Cobain.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so they're being used in a lot of different settings for different things. There are ones that are for fun. There's ones where they're trying to develop them for therapy. So it's kind of interesting. It's a growing field.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess a companion bot, like, the reason maybe I thought there may be a distinction to be made is that we've done some things on, I guess the word that comes to mind is the insidious nature
hmm
of chatbots generally. So, for instance, if you just using one of the standard Gen
hmm
AI tools, right, it has sort of that sycophantic personality that people,
hmm
have been talking about. So I sort of conflated that, but I could understand a companion bot or companion technology is
hmm
really designed to be a mentor, a coach, is
hmm
designed to have that overt relationship as opposed to
hmm
sort of that implicit relationship that you
Right.
get maybe from the Gen AI stuff. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. It's called a parasocial relationship.
uh,
Yeah. Fancy
well,
psychology word there.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Always looking to expand the vocabulary. Um, oh, it was also interesting. You gave a history. I don't want to get
Mhm.
into the whole sweep, the history of this technology. Maybe give the most recent history and maybe where we
Mhm.
are and maybe the next evolution, or maybe it's a
Mhm.
fork in the road.
Right.
whatever
Mhm.
that next thing is. Maybe it's just a pivot.
Yeah. I think before we go into that, I think one of the things with the history that's really interesting, um, because it's still relevant today, is that when they started developing these chatbots, like the where the Eliza effect came was coined as in 1966, which is what we just talked about, that like forming a relationship with a chatbot essentially. But what's really fascinating with that first chatbot in the 60s is that they used Rogerian therapy, like psychotherapy principles, to create these chatbots, which is like that unconditioned positive regard, something that we're taught to do in therapy to get people to open up to us. And
Is there an
like
example of that?
uh oh my gosh, of course, of course, one example. Yeah, like so one of the things is when I work with clients in therapy, the idea of the unconditioned positive regard is that I assume that my clients are coming from a place of honesty, they're doing their best, and I'm going to meet them where they are without judgment. And so that was the first. And what's interesting is they put that into those chatbots back in the 60s, and it's still part of like the AI chatting today. And so they're almost like
Interesting.
echo chamber. They don't do any pushback. They don't, like when you're in a relationship, there's conflict. Whether you're married, you have friends, you have kids. Gosh, if you got more than one kid, you can definitely see like that sibling conflict. Um, Chatbots don't have that. They have that unconditioned positive regard. So no matter what, they're an echo chamber. They're going to validate what you're doing without giving any pushback.
I see. So,
Hmm.
and this effect, the Eliza
Hmm.
effect,
Yep.
um, again, in reading the presentation, see, you have the Turing test. So I guess this is sort of an order of
Hmm.
magnitude more sophisticated.
Hmm. Yeah. And so the Lies effect was actually really interesting, that it was coined by an MIT computer programmer in the 60s when he noticed that people who are, computer programmers or whatever, when they were having these conversations that they had pre-fed into the computer, were starting to develop like affection for the thing, and started of the computer and the program, and started seeing it as a real person, as an entity. And that's where it comes in. And Eliza was named after Eliza from Pygmalion, the novel.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why can't a woman be more like a man? There needs to be a chatbot corollary of that. We'll come up with it.
Yes. Yes. And then what was really, and I'm such a nerd
Decorate.
with this.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
You got me going.
that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Is that this researcher, or this programmer, took Eliza and then created the first therapy chatbot in 1966, called
Mm.
it Doctor with all capital letters, and shared it with psychiatrists. And psychiatrists, so for folks who don't know, psychiatrist prescribes medications. I don't. I'm a psychologist, so I do therapy and testing and all that good stuff. But they showed it to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrists were like, great, we can prescribe the meds, and then we can give the chatbot to the patients to talk, in the 60s.
So they so they said they could actually use this to prescribe meds based on the intake.
No, no, it would be the psychiatrist would still do the meds, but then he could give his patients to the chatbot to do the therapy.
I see.
Hmm.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought maybe the psychiatrist is actually using that in lieu of a face-to-face kind of interaction, and based
Hmm.
on that, they prescribe the meds and then
Hmm.
also pass them off to this for
Hmm.
ongoing therapy. Oh, that's it. And this is 66.
Yeah, and the book came out in 1970, I believe. It's called Computer Power and Human Reason.
Wow. So, and how long was that sort of the standard, and how long was that sort of in play, if you will?
I don't know how long it was in play. I don't think it was in play very long. It didn't quite catch on. And then, new tech.
To what extent did it catch on?
It really didn't. It was just not quite the
More
way
like a
it is now.
theoretical
Yeah.
thing, more like an experimental
Hmm. More like a
kind of
prototype.
process.
They had it. It wasn't mass produced or anything like that. It was really just researched out of MIT.
So, what's the next big step in this technology? What was the next
Hmm.
big step?
What was it? So there wasn't a whole lot going on, and then there were a couple things that happened like in the 80s and the 90s, and then in the 90s we got the Tamagotchi eggs. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Hmm. That's
Yes.
like, yeah, that was like really, if you think about it, it's really like your first mass marketed like AI companion. And so sometimes the Eliza effect is
Yeah.
actually
Now,
also
the way
called
that worked, if
the.
memory served, I had a kid at the time. I
Hmm.
still have a kid, a lot older than she was then. Um, it's the way it goes.
Hmm.
If I remember, you had to sort of take care of it, and it would go through various psychological moods,
Hmm.
or right, depending, and,
Hmm.
and it could actually die.
Yes. Yes, I killed many a Tamagotchis
You've
in
killed
my
many.
90s.
Wow.
I was a teenager. I was like, I forgot about it. Yeah.
Wow. I
Mhm.
hope that's not prosecutable. I'm
I
sure
know.
there's a statute of limitations, but
Well, let's hope so.
interesting.
Hmm.
So, um, that technology is that sort of an outgrowth
Hmm.
of other work, or did that actually, in and of itself, lead to a more professional use of that underlying technology?
I think it was like more of a, and this is just my hypothetical thinking on it. I think that the Tamagotchi was more of it getting to the masses at that point. Because before then, you really didn't have it. Like people had computers, but you didn't have a computer that you in like took care of and talked to and interacted with. Like
Right.
your Donkey Kong and stuff like that. But so I think the Tamagotchi was like the first, like really mass marketed like where the public was like, "This is cool. I've got my little like virtual companion."
Yeah. It seems that, sort of the next, I don't know if this is the right term for it, inflection point.
Hmm.
Some of this technology sort of evolved, like, I don't know, I'm just picking a number out of the air, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
Hmm.
I know I started talking to a lot of companies in that space and being more aware of companies in that space, mental health apps, wellness apps, and the like. At the time, I think the issue is that not many of them were evidence based.
Hmm.
There was still quite a bit of pushback. People in the field worried that these things were going to supplant them, and there also, and I think you and I talked about, this
Hmm.
duty to warn, that there was also that critical missing
Hmm.
element. But things seem to have been evolving to a point where this is more, I wouldn't necessarily use the word ubiquitous, but it's certainly embraced by quite a few people,
Hmm.
even people in the field, practitioners.
Hmm.
Um, and I think some of the stigma has gone down. And since we spoke, I think you had discovered that there are some companies out there that are looking into or actually providing that duty to warn functionality in their app.
Hmm. Yeah, some are starting to incorporate that. And there was a recent research paper that somebody forwarded my way, which I was like, oh, this is awesome. Um, on why, LLMs at this point still can't replace therapists because the dangers are too high. Some of it is not just that duty to warn. There are other things that I hadn't thought of that when I was reading that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Some of it is like around the assessment of danger, the assessment of risk, and things like that. And one of my colleagues said to me, you know, like, where is it learning how to do therapy? Which I had always wondered that too. Like, where's it learning? But as therapists, we don't take great notes, like in terms that we could teach somebody, what we do or how we do it. We don't. We write down the highlights, we write down what we need to do for the insurance company for billing, stuff like that. We don't write down verbatim what people say. I never take notes in a therapy session. I always do my notes afterwards so that I can be completely present. So it can't learn from therapy notes.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what's it learning from? And some of the stuff is so subtle and so nuanced that only comes with years of practice.
Yeah. At least for now.
For now. For now.
Yes, for now. So yeah, I kind of want to dig into this a little bit more. You mentioned the psychological and emotional dynamics
Hmm.
you list. So, by the way, I really wish you did not mention Pygmalion. Now I got all this stuff running through my head.
Hmm.
Rain in Spain falls mainly
Hmm.
on the plain. I mean, this is not going to end well. Anyway, let's talk. Let's talk about some of these dynamics.
Hmm.
Again, anthropomorphism, loneliness. You and I had spoken
Hmm.
offline at length about that. attachment theory, social
Mhm.
penetration. So anthropomorphism.
Right.
You kind of started touching on
Mhm.
that, and I kind of started touching on that a little bit. And by the way, it's kind of interesting that I reflexively, and I know this is a thing. It's not just unique with me. I'll usually preface a query I'll put to chat
Mhm.
or whatever tool I'm using. Please,
Mhm.
it's just a
Yeah.
reflex because it does feel like there is some intelligence
Mhm.
percolating on the other side of this.
Mhm. Oh,
Anyway, so
absolutely. Yeah, and I have the urge to thank it as well for its help.
right,
And
right,
but what's funny
and
is that,
scold it
yeah.
and punish it, put it in timeout. Let's be
Yeah.
fair.
And
Okay.
ChatGPT actually loses millions of dollars with those extra words because it
Yeah.
has to analyze like the pleases, the thank yous, and mhm.
I know we're not doing anybody any great favors by being polite.
I don't.
You know,
Mhm.
doesn't always have utility.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
anthropomorphism,
Yeah.
speak to that if you will.
Sure. And I think everybody's guilty of this. So it's basically, it's the idea that you project human traits onto something that's not human or inanimate. Specifically, like we do this with cars. I had a 350Z for 14 years. I that it wasn't an it. The car I like, she had a name. Her name was Marilyn. Like that was my baby, you know. I know I know it's a car. I know, but like
Right.
that's not unusual. There's not
No.
people who ride motorcycles, they get very attached to them. Um so yeah, but when we start to see them as empathetic beings who can have that interaction with us, as have a social interaction with us, have a relationship with us, that's kind of where that moves into. But it's not like everything else, it's on a spectrum.
So there are good and bad, I'm assuming. I
Mhm,
mean, if you're looking for companion technology, it implies that there's going to be, well, although on the one hand, it implies that it's going to be more empathetic, and maybe it is, or maybe you look at it and say, well, it's not inherently empathetic, where
mhm,
because we're ascribing these human characteristics to us, we're
mhm,
deluding ourselves into thinking it is. So somewhere
mhm,
in between is the reality. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So if you're projecting qualities that really aren't there, but maybe that's in a weird way by design and promotes
mhm,
trust where you can have a productive interaction if it is
mhm,
a real companion
mhm,
bot. So it's kind of a weird
mhm.
duality. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
How about loneliness?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Human beings, we are social animals. And we do better when we're in, I mean, our society is not quite set up to be social or community oriented anymore, but it is so important to be part of community and to be social, to have those social connections, that we look for them. And that's actually what's really interesting. That's one ways that gangs will actually recruit young kids, ones that who are neglected. They're vulnerable because they're
Yeah.
lonely. So it's easier for me, as a gang leader, to be like, all right, there's the next generation. I can feed them, give them all those things, give them the support, and they'll join me. So it's so important for humans to be able to have like that connection and to have, and we have a need for safe interactions.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that this technology can exacerbate that sense
Mhm.
of loneliness.
It can, and it can also fill that lonely void, even
Right.
if it's in a pseudo way. And it does for some people. I'm seeing that more and more in private practice, where people will reach out to, or have conversations with chatbots, or create, use some of the different AI technologies out there now to create a character to interact with them.
Right. So just like with anthropomorphism,
Mhm.
it sort of cuts both ways. There are some
Mhm.
um, positive and perhaps unintended
Mhm.
negative consequences.
Mhm.
Attachment theory. What is that, and how does that factor into this?
So, attachment theory is basically, we look at how people develop bonds with each other. So there's secure attachment, and then there's insecure attachment. And insecure attachment often comes from trauma and neglect, and that's where you don't feel like you can be yourself in relationship. Like, it could be from a couple different things, but for an example of like an insecure attachment, like you don't feel like you can be yourself, or you can be yourself without judgment. And so, but you're looking for that secure attachment. So you may start, hanging out with chatbots because they're going to interact with you without judgment, without making you feel bad, or without like dismissing you or being like, oh, I don't have time for you right now.
Right. So it fills that need. But
Mm-hmm.
also, just as in loneliness can also give you that false sense where it sort of
Mm-hmm.
reaches a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Social penetration.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a big word, to say that basically what happens with it is that the more, so when you meet somebody, usually you're very polite, very formal. Hi, how are you? Use titles, stuff like that. But as time goes on, the more you share with somebody, the more they share with you. And so that's what they call the social penetration. And so you end up having a deeper connection the more you share with somebody.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, Getting deeper into the presentation, you mentioned Fogg's persuasive design formula. What is that?
Yes. So basically, what the idea behind, Fogg's persuasive design formula, and this is used by a lot of tech development companies. And what it is, it's the idea that you need three things in order to engage, in order to create a behavior: motivation, ability, and a prompt. They used to call it a trigger. I guess, they don't anymore because like triggers an overused word. And basically, what they do is they try to get, for, the behavior could be, engaging with a chatbot, it could be using social media. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to use that formula to get you to engage with the product with the least amount of obstacles so that you continue to do it. They make it easy. And so that's how that's used. And it's used, basically, it's used to get consumers to use a product and be users for life.
Um, it's interesting. We had Ryan Carrier, the CEO for Humanity, on,
Hmm.
and very interesting conversation. And they're doing amazing work. He's doing amazing work. And we talked about design, uh, um, different ways that companies design their digital or social media products to promote this addictive
Hmm.
behavior, nudges. I think the term he used was maybe destructive design embedded in the design, or some of these things. Yes, lower barriers
Hmm.
make some of these behaviors more habit
Hmm.
forming and so forth. So I'm assuming we're talking about the same thing. And,
Hmm.
you know, in the X Files, we did in the complimentary Substack, we did a piece on AI addiction. And
Hmm.
I just had a very interesting conversation with somebody who's going to be on another podcast I do. He's the Harvard faculty school of something, something, but is a psychiatrist.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I was talking to him about AI and psychiatry, AI and psychology, and he immediately, as many people do, was starting to talk about the tools and using the tools in practice and how that
Hmm.
all works. But I said, what we want to do is we really want to talk. That's a worthwhile conversation, but we want to go in the other direction and talk about all the anxiety that AI
Hmm.
is causing, and how people really need to start developing either their own personal bespoke strategies, or organizations need to sort of have safeguards or certain
Hmm.
things in their organization to promote some decent behaviors. So um that's going to be a huge growing problem.
Hmm.
um we already talked about some of the dangers, for instance, the loneliness attachment theory.
Hmm.
Yeah, how the technology could promote good and bad. Um, Also, what you discussed in your presentation was its impact on interpersonal
Hmm.
relationships.
Yes.
What did you find
Hmm.
there?
The biggest thing, the first thing that I thought of when I was doing all this is that these AI bots have the potential to create better than real life interactions. Because real life is messy. I mean, but that's part of being human. Like, it's messy. You make mistakes. People get hurt. Um, and with these AI interactions, I mean, you can just make it perfect. You can make all these interactions perfect and make it better than real life. And so that's a big, um, big concern. Uh,
So in other words, you're creating these idealized
mhm,
relationships that cannot possibly be duplicated in a human-to-human relationship.
mhm,
And,
exactly.
it creates expectations that are unrealistic. And from those
Mhm,
expectations, tension,
mhm,
resentment, and all the other stuff that comes with a relationship
mhm.
going south.
Yeah,
Lovely.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in relationships, like you need to have really good communication. And so, if you're communicating with a chatbot where you're not getting the pushback, it can reduce your communication with the relationships in your real life. You may not be as comfortable being vulnerable about around people in your real life as you are with the chatbot, because the chatbot 100% is not going to judge you and will be supportive. Um, it can also replace human bonding because it's again so important to have those bonds with other humans, like with your kids, with your friends, with your social network. It's so important to have those, and all of those are at risk if you spend too much time, like or you get too emotionally attached to these chatbots. And it's especially true in young kids and teenagers where they're still developing, their brains are still developing, they're still developing those emotional centers, and they're
Mhm.
developing things that will habits and ways of doing things that
Right.
are going to carry through the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Although an interesting other example, my daughter
Mhm.
is on the verge or was on the verge of moving in with her boyfriend of 2 years.
Mhm.
And they were sort of at loggerheads. They weren't sure if they were ready to take this next step. So my daughter fed a whole lot of information to ChatGPT, trying to suss out why exactly her boyfriend is saying or believes or is taking this position. And she found it to be very helpful. It was sort of
Mhm.
an iterative process, and it really helped her form
Mhm.
her thinking, give her some insights. And it actually worked. It was a big help in her
Mhm.
relationship. But, I take your point. So, are there any best practices, any things that people could do to maintain some sort of AI
Mhm.
hygiene? Any good hygiene tips for
Mhm.
keeping some of this stuff at bay, or at least maintaining a good balance? We're all going to be
Mhm.
using AI tools, and sometimes we're going to be using them and not even being aware that we're using them.
No, oh, absolutely, because it's I mean, we're looking in the next couple of years for our phones to be completely AI. And all sorts of things are coming. I think the big thing is, first of all, boundaries. Like when we think about boundaries, a lot of people think it's like interpersonal boundaries, like, oh no, I don't like this, so I'm not going to be involved with this. But there are also boundaries around time, like how much time is okay to spend playing on these chatbots or using these chatbots. And so that's really important because you don't want it to be too much. And I'm not an advocate for abstaining from everything completely, because there are benefits. I mean, entertainment purposes, stuff like that. Some of them are fun. But yeah, you have to have that like time boundary. Like, okay, how much time I'm going to be spending on this, and then boundaries about what you're willing to do with them and what you're willing to disclose. Because the other thing people don't always realize is that anything that you're putting into the AI, it's learning from that. And so I think that's really important to know. The other big thing is to look at their privacy practices. What are they doing with your information? What are their settings? I think that's the biggest thing, is to like, how are they using your information? Are they taking it to teach? How is that information being disseminated? There's so much money to be made in data sharing on the secondary market when you use technology, that it's really important to know if your data is being shared. Hmm? There's a
Yeah,
couple things.
yeah, I'm wondering, and this may sound like I'm being flippant, but if it would make sense to have something like a warning label,
Hmm.
to the extent that you should be aware that
Hmm.
you are interacting with a chatbot. There
Hmm.
should be, maybe just to get you out of this sort of almost like a
Yeah.
trance-like state,
Hmm.
but like sort of a commercial timeout. By the way,
Hmm.
you are speaking with, and you have to sort of recite certain
Hmm.
things like this is chatbot Bob
Hmm.
and created in such and such version to, you know what I mean? Just
Hmm.
keep reminding you that what you're interacting with is a robot. It's not a human
Hmm.
being. So you just sort of reminded of that,
Hmm.
you
No,
know?
I think that's a that's a great idea because, as a psychologist, I completely 100% believe in informed consent, which means anything that you consent to, you should know what's happening. When I work with patients or if I'm doing testing or forensic, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. There's always the 100% informed consent. Do you know the risks? Are you aware? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. By the way, I might not have come up with that notion had you not mentioned Pygmalion, because I'm thinking uh, the playwright Bertolt Brecht, that was
Hmm.
part of his thing, like Caucasian Chalk Circle and all of his stuff. Mother Courage, he wanted you as a theater goer to always know you're watching a play. So you don't
Hmm.
get lost in the drama. You already know how this is going to end, so you could draw the important lessons in these
Hmm.
sort of didactic exercises. That was his thing.
Hmm.
But I think if you take that kind of design idea into this, so people are always made aware at certain intervals,
Hmm.
that may make a
Yeah.
little bit of a difference. I don't know, but there are probably so many things in it. It's
Hmm.
so early into all these things. And every conversation I seem to end by saying, well, you know, this is true today, maybe
Hmm.
true tomorrow. Um, but it's like that old line, no man steps into the same river twice,
Right.
so 6 months later, this is going to be a different conversation.
Hmm.
Anyway, great conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. The second of many. We
Hmm.
have a couple
Yes,
of others that
absolutely.
we're going to be talking about. I do really want to get deeper into the idea of loneliness, particularly
Hmm.
male loneliness. We know that
Hmm.
that's greatly on the rise. We know that there are some implications
Oh, yes,
for
100%.
AI as far as
Hmm.
that goes.
Hmm.
So that's a big deal. Genevieve, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was as always, it was so much fun to be here.
Yes, thanks. See you soon.
See ya.